This is 13 Minutes. I'm Elliot Reeves. My guest today is Tabi Jayne. Tabi, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here. How are you?
I am very well and looking forward to the conversation. I'm very happy to be here, Elliot.
Supremely happy to be chatting with you. It's nice to have a familiar face to speak with.
Yes, well, we do go back quite a few years, don't we?
We certainly do, yeah. So, as a means of introducing yourself, for anyone that doesn't know you, who are you?
So my name is Tabitha, or as you said, Tabi Jayne, and I am the director and lead coach at Earthself. And where I focus on is coaching, but coaching with nature. And I work with leaders and organisations in order to help them develop and enhance their organisation, making it more resilient and sustainable. And I also train other people in my coaching methodology as well.
You've worked on that pitch. That was good.
That was the first time that came out my mouth, so I'm glad it's sounding as if I'm working on it, because before it used to be, I've got to say what I do. I don't really know what I do.
Yeah, the whole articulation process. That was on point, though. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. How have you been managing yourself throughout this lockdown period?
Well, I think I am in an incredibly fortunate position in that most of my work is online and virtual anyway. Mm-hmm. So there has not been a large amounts of change in my life from lockdown. I think my biggest insight has been I probably live most of my life on lockdown anyway. As in, I like staying indoors, going out for walks, and I would say that's been the biggest way of how I've managed it. I mean, I stay with my mum. My mum was obviously very nervous. She's an NHS worker, about what was happening with coronavirus. And I said to her, well, the first thing that we have to do is focus on health. So we have been going out an hour and 10 minutes walk in the morning, in the evening, which, according to Scottish guidelines, if you've got dogs, you're able to do that. We also live at the edge of a small town, so we've been very much staying in an isolated route and taking that time to go for those walks with the dogs, really appreciate nature. No surprise there. And one of the things that I did very quickly with my mum to help her change her mindset was we started implementing gratitude on the walk. So every morning it would be, what are 3 things that you're grateful for? And we've focused on we're spending more time together and consciously having conversations to help us navigate the challenges of being in each other's pockets 24/7, and how do we strengthen our relationship as a chance throughout lockdown?
Which is a great question. How do you do that?
Well, I'll give you a laugh here. I realised quite quickly that, I could have probably killed my mum quite quickly if I hadn't put in the gratitude. So I was like, right, I can either get frustrated with my mother or I can look at what is the positive things that we can do and how do we work on having better communication. I'm not going to say it's always been successful. There's been a bit of tension now and again from different conversation styles, but we've developed into a rhythm and a routine. And I suppose it starts with how do you focus on the positive stuff and bear in mind that if you allow the negative to overwhelm you, it's never a good outcome.
Yeah. I'm just intrigued now. What are some of your trigger points and how do you manage those?
What are some of my trigger points? So my trigger points is my mum has a wonderful way of, she will tell a story and do 20 million points at the same time. And I'm like, could you just get to the point? Would you synthesize it? Could you communicate better? So my mum obviously gets irritated because she's like, I can't communicate like you. I'm not a professional. And I'm like, look, I'm not a professional either. So there's a difference in communication styles, and we've just had to almost learn and adapt to identify, okay, what's somebody's trigger points. So I can, be quite sharp and blunt. Step back and don't be so sharp and blunt with your mother. It's not a good thing. So I'm learning to be more tactful and gentle in how I approach things. And I would say that's probably my biggest trigger point, as well as my mum talks so much. Like, so we go out for walks and it's and I'm like, oh, could I just have 5 minutes of silence? So we've solved that one, because now I go ahead in the walks when I want some more time to myself, and then I come back and then I speak to her. And, the first time I did that, she was like, oh, people will think we're from separate households, and she felt a bit awkward. But now she's kind of comfortable, because it's like, okay, I'll go away and do my thing, and then I'll come back, and then we'll have a better conversation because I've cleared my head. I've had, that time alone looking at the natural world. And what I've also realised is bringing in some of the stuff that I do within work into the conversations with my mum. So noticing nature when my mum's talking too much. Wow, mum, look at the sky. And then we talk about the sky and we look about the sky, and I'm like, oh, I'm quite happy because we're focusing on nature here. So it's an interesting experience bringing some of this into the family life, because I've never done it this way with my mum.
Oh, it's so funny. It's brilliant. Paddy Hunter, Patrick, he's watching and he's saying this is funny but real. Oh, it's great. No, it's like there's very close members of my own family that like to sort of project outwards the stream of consciousness that comes, that emits from them. Whereas I'm somebody who I think tends to sort of internalize. I sort of keep my inner narrative to myself.
Yes.
And so for someone that puts it out there a lot, I'm just like, yeah, you can keep that to yourself.
Well, that's it. It's like, yes, I don't need to know the list of 20 million things that you're going to do today, mother, and the things that you haven't done. And, that's the point where I just have to forgive myself and go, do you know something? You think differently, and that's okay. And sometimes mum doesn't even notice if I've switched off, but I'm getting better at that in terms of bringing in more meaningful conversation, because that's what I enjoy.
Excellent. So I mean, your business is called Earthself. In what way do you think that the Earth might be different as a result of this entire situation?
Ooh, I like that. In what way do I think the Earth? I think it's interesting in terms of the fact that we're already seeing signs of the Earth changing as human activities lessened, and it's something that I've talked a lot about with clients, with other coaches that I've been training, how nature seems to be coming closer. So the bird song's louder, the sky seems more vivid, which I didn't think we had pollution in Scotland, but now that somebody's pointed it out, I'm sometimes just in awe of how stunning the sky is. But when we bring it down, I mean, we have to recognise that the Earth isn't just nature. The Earth is everything in its ecosystem, so that includes humans as well. So how is the Earth going to be different after coronavirus? I think there's going to be a process of adaptation and change that it would be nice to predict what that's going to be. And for me, I mean, you know me, I wouldn't even say I believe in creating a sustainable future. I am quite confident that that's going to happen. So I think potentially that this is going to accelerate a far more harmonious relationship between humanity and nature within the Earth, and accelerate some of those changes to a sustainable world. Will it be smooth, easy, pleasant and fun? Not quite sure about that. However, I do think that that will be the end result in the long term.
I'll give a bit of context to my next train of thought and question, because I'm not trying to open a can of conspiracy worms. But I myself wonder if there is a sort of greater reason as to why a lot of this is happening. So I had a conversation with my dad, and he had said that I don't know whether it was his idea or someone had said, like, the universe is kind of doing this because we've become so out of balance or out of alignment, or it's like nature's way of kind of bringing us back to center point because we've gone so far one way that we need to recalibrate. What are your own thoughts around maybe why this is happening just now?
Well, I think what you're talking about there is a hugely valid point, because when you come from a systems thinking perspective, systems are so big, and some of our human systems like society, education are actually invisible. And what happens when you have a system working is that the sum of the system, so all the parts, but the behavior is greater than the parts together.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy for people to then make stories up about what potentially this could be. I think that from my understanding of it, the Earth has been around, the asteroid or the old moon hit it 4.5 billion years ago. Then life started to spring 3.8 billion years ago. There is a very sophisticated system at play that allows life to sustain on Earth. And right now we are out of harmony with that system. And, there's a lot of talk in terms of looking at climate change and how there can be positive tipping points, which means that behavior is going to speed up. One way of looking at what's happening is that the coronavirus could be interpreted as a negative tipping point. And there are some theories out there within the research that's saying it's because we're expanding our human environments and encroaching on territories that we haven't come into contact with, that these viruses that we would never come in contact with are then making that jump into us. So there's one perspective there. But what we also have to recognize, if we're coming from a systems perspective, is we've got systems within systems within systems within systems. So there are multiple systems functioning together. It's not just that this is the Earth's ecosystem. We've also got, if you look at it and you said conspiracy theories, well, what is the sustainable development goals actually the wonderful idea of utopia, or is it actually part of a hidden agenda to control and enslave people? Now, I don't have an answer for that, but what I see, or I would say my understanding of that is that we have people who don't fully understand how systems work, seeing that something is wrong and articulating it the best that they possibly can. Because when you go and you look at every single bit of information out there, and what I mean by that is, obviously I've not done every single bit of information, but what I like noticing is themes and patterns. And what I see when I look at some of the conspiracy theory stuff compared to some of the stuff in mainstream, never mind that there is clearly biases and hidden agendas, which are highly entertaining when you're able to see them, fundamentally people are saying the same thing. There's something wrong with the system. It's not working. We need to change it. And the most important thing to do to change it is for you to become aware and realize that you're a powerful being capable of change. Now, when you come back to systems thinking, that is the most effective way that you change a system. So everything, I suppose, could be interpreted through that lens of saying this is a huge systems change. And with any paradigm shift, whether you go and look at systems thinking, which is what it talks about, Elliot, where there's always tension, as the system changes, old forces trying to pull it back into its similar way of happening. Thomas Kuhn's work on scientific revolutions talks about before there's a paradigm shift, there's a moment of tension that's so great just before the new ideas come in. And I think that this is what we're seeing happening quite clearly at this precise moment, that we are going through a systems change, and we're at that point of hitting that tipping point where things are really showing, and then something's going to happen afterwards.
What an amazing answer. I really wish we had more time to explore all these themes, but we're virtually out of time with these short interviews. In one word, what change would you most like to see in the world?
Easy. Harmony. And what that
Harmony.
means is peace between the head and the heart.
That's brilliant. What advice would you give to anyone that was having an extremely difficult time with the lockdown situation?
I would give my go-to advice. Spend time in nature. If you can't get outside and you don't have access to a garden, look out your window, look at a picture of nature, get a pot plant, become mindful of it, because there are numerous benefits which, if we'd need a whole different podcast for me to cite all of that. This is one of the most simplest, powerful things that you can do, is to become present and aware of nature in any form, even if it is a documentary, because that will create changes within your physiology and impact your mind, your mood, and help you start to become more resilient.
Fantastic. Where can people find you, Tabi?
They can find me at www.earthself.org.
Perfect. I can't articulate how much I've enjoyed speaking with you. It's been absolutely fantastic. Just mind-blowingly good answers. So thank you so much for your time. And it's been brilliant. Take care of yourself, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Tabi.